As you've been watching the stock markets in sell-off mode right now, a combination of things, including trade fears, that's weighing on technology stocks, which, of course, had been a big leader throughout the last year and early January. Over the next 2 hours, we're going to continue to break what's driving all of this because there are a lot of factors, including China tacking on tariffs. This is official now, their official response to our crackdown on their steel and aluminum. And President Trump slamming Mexico for not stopping the heavy flow of drugs and people that continue to cross their border, and now threatening to stop NAFTA if Mexico doesn't do more. This, of course, sparking even more trade uncertainty. Here to help us all break it down, GOP pollster Chris Wilson and Daily Mail White House correspondent Francesca Chambers. Francesca, let me start with you. This morning it feels like President Trump has more or less thrown down the gauntlet on Mexico, China, the GOP leadership in the Senate for not using a nuclear option, Democrats, and just about everyone else, and it's sort of reflected in the market here.
Yeah, busy morning for President Trump before he went to the Easter egg roll on Twitter. And you mentioned the market, just looking at Amazon stock, as you said, this is not the first time in the last couple of days that we've seen the president take aim at Amazon specifically, and it has been reflected in the company's stock, losing billions over the last week, as you can see, as the president has suggested that he could take action against the e-commerce giant. In the tweet this morning, President Trump made it sound like he could potentially review the deal that Amazon has with the U.S. Postal Service. Now, the White House hasn't said anything about that. And in fact, when I asked last week whether or not the president was moving towards an internet sales tax, the White House said that it had absolutely nothing to announce at this point and that there were no plans for anything. However, that doesn't mean that the president hasn't been talking about it behind closed doors. And of course, we heard last week that he's obsessed with the company and that he is looking one way or another to take action against it.
You know, here's the thing, Chris. President Trump has long said he was going to fight for the forgotten middle of America, not the elites and not the elite companies like the Amazons of the world. Certainly, I think they got the better of the deal with the U.S. Postal Service, and until recently, they did not have to pay state and local taxes. So now there's the idea perhaps of leveling the playing field even more, adjusting that U.S. Postal Service contract. I'm not sure what it would take to do that and how much of a role Congress would play, but perhaps also an internet sales tax. What are your thoughts on all of it?
Well, I think it's interesting. Every time the president goes out into the country and has a rally and speaks to regular people, he comes back with some sort of a new proposal like this or an attitude like this specific to a company. This time it happens to be Amazon, and it's pretty clear that Amazon has an impact on sort of mom-and-pop stores all over the nation. And I'm sure that is exactly sort of that forgotten man that you mentioned that President Trump ran for, that he won their votes, and that he has promised to represent. And so the idea of being able to stand up for them is, in his mind, taking on the Amazons of the world, but it's also making sure that the American taxpayer isn't subsidizing Amazon's shipping patterns. And so now he's taken a look at, as a business person, the deal that the Amazon has with the Postal Service and come to the conclusion that it's not fair. It's not fair to the taxpayer. It's not fair to those people who have to compete against Amazon. And so from that, I think it makes sense for him to say, to announce that he's going to that he is going to review it. Yeah. Now, clearly it has an impact on the stock market, and that's something that's got to be expected.
You know, ironically, the Congress prohibited the U.S. Postal Service from competing with the UPS and FedEx. And the reason I say ironically is because Amazon has wisely been able to take advantage of their deal with the U.S. Postal Service, and now they'll launch their own versions of FedEx and UPS. So, it's really an interesting thing. Of course, another big topic today, President Trump slamming Mexico. I want to bring in Center for Immigration Studies Director of Policy Studies, Jessica Vaughan. Jessica, Mexico, of course, stepping up to the plate, doing more to protect our borders. We talk often about the opioid crisis and fentanyl flowing freely through the border. We know the economic cost, of course, and President Trump, I think, probably saw some video of people sort of just strolling through the borders, a reminder of just how porous it is, and he's lashed out today. What are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, this is happens periodically. This is like a walkathon for open borders, where it seems that this group of more than 1,000 people coming from Central America wants to test our resolve, and the government of Mexico knows that their destination is the United States, so they don't see any reason to deal with them by enforcing their own immigration laws. As long as they think that the United States is going to let people in, Mexico is going to let them pass through as if it's not their problem. But the difference now is that the Trump administration is much less likely to just let people into the country. So Mexico better start thinking about how it's going to deal with these people if they start stacking up in Mexico. We're not just going to admit people as they make it to the border. But it really underlines the need for Congress to step up and give the president some support in the form of resources and reforming our laws, particularly our broken asylum system, which is the part of the weakest link in our immigration law right now,
right, that
needs to be addressed. And I hope that we don't just sit back and wait for these people to arrive. The administration needs to be taking some steps to deal with Mexico and lean on them and get them to deal with it before it gets to the U.S. border.
Well, Francesca, again, back on Capitol Hill, none of this is new. And I think President Trump a little bit frustrated, particularly Trump 2.0 in the second year, trying to deliver on these promises. Not getting a lot of help necessarily from the GOP, certainly on the Senate side, it feels like, and he seems to be pressuring them as well.
Right, and in those tweets, he said that the Senate should go nuclear, which means that they would get rid of the 60 votes they would need to overcome a filibuster and go down to just 51 votes. But here's the problem with that. Even some GOP senators, as you just mentioned, aren't necessarily in favor of his immigration plans. He would run into opposition potentially with Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, Jeff Flake of Arizona, or John McCain of Arizona even, if he tried to push through an immigration bill that had his border wall money in it and a total overhaul of the legal immigration system, but didn't have DACA in it. And the president now suggesting that DACA is not possible anymore because of where we are at this point. And so he would lose even some Republican senators at that 51 vote option if he did not have DACA in the deal.
All right. Thank you all very much.